Thank you. Sisters and brothers, thank you so much for that wonderful welcome and having me here at your conference in Brighton. The GMB conferences have a pretty important memory for me in recent times. After all, it was the very first hustings of the 2015 leadership campaign when we held the hustings at your conference in Dublin. It was an event that certainly changed my life and also changed the lives of many others by allowing for a real and genuine discussion about the kind of future that we all want for our people and for our country. And I really enjoyed that conference and the sense of inclusion and warmth that was there. I also want to thank the GMB for all the support and all the support you've given to the Labour Party over many years from its foundation onwards and continue to be that vital part of our movement. And I want to thank Tim Roach, your General Secretary, for everything and all the positive work that he does for the movement. And the other part you might not be so keen on, but I share it with him. I want to thank him for being such a committed Arsenal supporter as well. You see, in one sentence, you can completely divide a conference. Can I bring you back together then? Because there's somebody else who should not go unmentioned, and that's Mary Turner. She was a member of the... She was a member, as you know, of the Labour Party National Executive, as well as being your very long-standing president. I first met Mary in what were very dark days in the early 1980s, when we were both campaigning together to prevent the privatisation of public services and the damage being done by the Tories to the school meals service in the boroughs of Barnet, particularly where I was an organiser for NUPE. But Mary and I got along very well. She was a real fighter, campaigner for people, and a true comrade. And I'm sure on behalf of you, I say to Mary and her family, thank you for all that you did for our movement during your long and wonderful life. Mary was one of the great trade unionists of her generation that paved the way for a new generation of young and dynamic trade unionists, active as labour movement activists, and we rely on them for the future. And I congratulate the GMB on your young members' work as well, because whatever they say, the place for every young worker to be, and I make this appeal, I'm sure on behalf of you, is in a union. Join a union for your protection in the future. Our party, Labour, is no longer just a political party in Parliament, but a genuine mass movement of people across the UK, brimming with energy and ideas about how to transform our society for the better. We have fantastic new initiatives, such as our community organising unit, getting people organised in their local communities around the issues that matter to them: wages, housing, safer streets, better youth facilities, all the things that strong and vibrant communities need. And we have new types of political events, such as the Labour Live Festival, which is happening next week on the 16th of June. We'll have musicians, speakers, I'm a speaker, not a musician, activists, trade unionists, all coming together in one place to learn from each other, but also to enjoy ourselves while reflecting on how Labour has come on as a movement. The GMB is providing its members with tickets. The code should have been emailed to all of you, telling you how to redeem them. I would encourage you all to do so. Don't miss out. Join us next week for Labour Live. As a lifelong trade unionist myself, I know how necessary your strengths and how vital it is when we're in government. Your strength to empower and organise workers will, alongside a Labour government, challenge the powerful and transform and change our society and economy. And you'll keep us honest, making sure we're a government that actively invests in jobs, housing, the National Health Service, our children's education. Because we need a government that includes everybody and excludes nobody, ensuring investment in every community in the UK to encourage high-wage, high-skill, secure jobs, full employment for all. And it must be a government that ends the continual privatisations and deregulations of the past 30 years, which has allowed a tiny elite to grow obscenely rich on the back of everybody else. Look at the water industry, which was privatised in England and Wales by the Thatcher government in the late 1980s. I remember it well. I was in Parliament at the time. I opposed the move then, and I oppose it still. Whichever way you look at it, the privatisation of water has failed and been an unpopular experiment. It's been bad for workers in the industry, bad for bill payers. The only people it hasn't been bad for are rich shareholders who extract huge amounts in dividends and interest payments on the back of household bills. So it's clear that we must take back control of water in the UK, just as we must take back control of other vital utilities and industries such as energy, the railways and Royal Mail. Bringing water into public ownership would stop the siphoning off of money into the pockets of shareholders and reduce payments on the debts in the industry. This alone could lead to savings of up to £100 for every household in England every year, potentially bringing families' water bills down by 1/4 or allowing for the investing of those savings back into the water or other public infrastructure that will benefit everybody. The Tories and their friends in the media whip up controversy about this topic, trying to claim that giving people control over the water and other industries somehow signals the end of Western society as we know it, even though public ownership is the norm across most of Europe and indeed most of the United States. But we know that their scaremongering doesn't work. It's not fooling the people of this country. In a recent survey, a staggering 83% of the population found in favour of taking the water industry into public ownership. And it's no wonder when you consider that bills have risen by 40% in real terms since privatisation. Tories insisting that water and other utilities can't be run by and for the public are trapped. They're trapped in an outdated, irrelevant worldview that serves the interests of the few. And you can see why that elite few would do everything to make sure that nothing changes. In the last decade alone, the private water companies have paid out nearly £18 billion in dividends to shareholders. That's the equivalent of £750 for every household. And it gets worse. 3 of the 9 water and sewage companies, Anglian, Severn Trent and Yorkshire, paid out more in dividends than they received in pre-tax profits. So those companies are borrowing money to pay their shareholders bigger profits, and the public are being forced to pay the interest on the debt on their borrowing. When we say that our economy is rigged, this is exactly what we mean. That's why Labour is offering public ownership of water and other industries with profits fed back to consumers in reduced prices and bills and or reinvested in infrastructure. Public ownership will deliver a better deal for workers in the industry, which is why we're fully signed up to the GMB's 6 pledges for water, as well as better value for individuals and families. So, in opposition and in government, we want to work with the GMB to design a new structure of public ownership for the water industry. Collectively, as a society, We need a water supply that everybody has access to. So why shouldn't we collectively own the infrastructure that supplies it? Because this funneling of wealth out of the pockets of working people and straight into the bank accounts of the rich is something which can be observed right across the British economy. It's only common sense to want to change that and to ensure that those who work and actually create our society's wealth should get their fair share of it. But instead of investing in our industries and our communities, successive governments have been far too willing to give up their responsibilities to ensure people's well-being by saying they have to listen to the so-called free market. So we have democratic governments who the people elect and are supposed to represent us being dictated to by bond markets, the bankers, and the City of London, who have no accountability to the public whatsoever. And the consequences of this must be obvious to all. House and rent prices out of control as homes are turned into speculative investments for the few. Our NHS and its staff struggling as it's underfunded, broken up and sold off piece by piece. People's pay falling as trade unions are held back from organising. The longest decline in living standards in this country since the 19th century. And British industry on its knees as governments have repeatedly refused to support it. These are symptoms of a failing, rigged economy that's running down people's living standards and running down our society. And there are new threats to jobs and prosperity, both here and abroad. US President Donald Trump's latest unilateral steel tariffs are wrong. The Trump tariffs risk hurting workers in the United States and around the world by sparking a tit-for-tat retaliation. But US workers, whether in steel or any other industry, are not wrong to want a government that actively supports them and the real everyday economy. For 40 years, they've seen a completely rigged system shift more and more power and wealth to a tiny financial and political elite. Donald Trump's government doesn't support workers. Trying to hold back the tide with one hand and giving eye-watering handouts to the super rich with the other is no substitute for a government taking a proactive role in modernizing and upgrading industry so that it's cleaner, more efficient, and works for the many, not the few. That's why the next Labour government will work with the real experts. Workers, technicians, engineers and designers, their unions, consumers and communities to upgrade our economy by taking on the power of the tiny elite that's holding us back with their failed free market fundamentalism. Empowering people and standing up for the many, not the few, is what the Labour movement is all about. But the Tory government's timid response shamefully fails to stand up to Trump. We've seen it time and time again. Theresa May and her government were too weak to stand up to Trump over the Muslim ban, or his promotion of the disgusting Britain First, or his plunging the future of the planet into ever greater danger by pulling out of the Paris Climate Change Accord, or his punitive tariffs on Bombardier, or his ripping up of the Iran nuclear deal, or his reckless threat to peace by recognizing Jerusalem, including occupied Palestinian territory, as Israel's capital. The Tories are too weak to stand up to the powerful and too in hock to them, even if they wanted to. Theresa May is appeasing Donald Trump in the hope of getting a race-to-the-bottom trade deal with the US after we leave the European Union. The Trump trade tariffs show that it's a Tory pipe dream. Labour, on the other hand, is unapologetic in our desire to take this country forward. We've said from the very beginning that we respect the result of the referendum, as that is what the British people voted for. But that does not mean that we will accept the Tories' vision for Brexit that wants to turn back time and encourage a race to the bottom that will leave people poorer and less safe. Our priority has always been to get the best deal possible for people's jobs, living standards, and our economy. We know that the most important thing for people across the UK is access to high-wage, high-skilled, and secure employment that will enable people to live the healthy, prosperous, and well-rounded lives that they deserve and desire. That is why it's vital we secure a Brexit deal that works for everybody in the UK. In government, Labour would seek to negotiate a new partnership with the EU that includes a comprehensive customs union, continued access to the internal market, and a commitment, an absolute commitment to protect and enhance existing rights at work, standards and protections of our environment and consumer rights. This is vital to not only ensure there are no tariff and non-tariff barriers in future trade with Europe, but also in helping ensure there is no return to a hard border in Northern Ireland. Of course, the option of a new UK customs union with the EU would need to ensure the UK has a say in future trade deals, and any future single market relationship would also need to come with assurances, clarifications, and even potential opt-outs to ensure that future EU rules will not impede our commitment to public spending and investment in our economy. However, we are confident that under Labour we can build a new relationship with the EU that can help deliver our transformative programme and build an economy for the 21st century. I know some people are calling for Labour to support a Norway-style model, but we must understand that a Norway model is specifically designed to serve the interests of Norway and would not work for the UK. Labour wants the UK to have a better deal with Europe than the Norway model offers, and this includes continued single market access. We shouldn't just settle for the status quo. Instead, we need a deal that is fit for the 21st century. Because the status quo isn't good enough for people, for families, or the economy as a whole. We need to move forward, and to do that, we must be proactive. If there's not enough jobs, we must create those jobs. If people aren't paid well, we must legislate to ensure that they are. If investment is helping speculators and gamblers, but not people who make and create things, then the government must invest. Because at the moment, the government is completely refusing to support jobs and industry that people need. Take, for example, shipbuilding. The Tories are trashing a long and proud tradition of shipbuilding in the UK by farming out government contracts overseas. It is a terrible mistake being made by this government, turning its back on our industry, local economies, and on the working people of those communities. That's why Labour is proud to support the GMB's campaign to ensure the government's upcoming order for 3 new ships for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary are built here in domestic shipyards. Shipbuilding is an important industry for our economy, and it would be negligent not to support it. When you have huge global economies such as China subsidizing their shipbuilders by up to 20% in recent years, it's no wonder that their shipbuilding industry is increasing while ours shrinks. A Labour government would never allow this to happen. We would never allow for this potential loss of jobs and never allow for this potential loss of skill, as highly trained and skillful engineers, technicians, welders and riggers are cast aside and undercut. We would use this potential for public contracts as part of our bigger plans to upgrade our economy. With jobs that pay, on average, 45% better than the average for all jobs in the UK, the high-skilled jobs profile in shipbuilding puts it alongside aerospace and other engineering sectors. in being exactly the type of jobs we need in a 21st century economy. We must make sure this happens by rejecting the Tories' outdated obsession with free markets that gives too much power to out-of-control multinational companies who have no care for the everyday needs of workers and consumers. The upcoming contract for the Royal Fleet Auxiliary ships alone could offer opportunities for 450 new apprentices, the engineers of the future, and almost 5,000 jobs in the wider supply chain, on top of the shipyard jobs and the other additional employment created in the local communities. Your union, the GMB, has estimated that the total shipbuilding workforce are paid about £1 billion annually, 238 million of which is returned to the Exchequer in taxes, money which goes to fund our National Health Service, our children's schools, and money that would be lost if the government sent the contract overseas. The opportunity for this investment is obvious. The only thing holding back that investment is the ideological obsession of the Conservative government, too interested in the whims of the market, too disinterested in the needs of the people of this country. Why waste this chance for more high-wage jobs for people in our society who are currently stuck on low-pay or zero-hours contracts? I ask the question. Let's take the opportunity now. Low pay and insecurity are endemic in our economy. Too many people are held back as they struggle to earn enough money to give them a decent standard of living. We need bold action to quickly get more money into people's pockets at the end of the month. That's why, in our last manifesto, for the many, not the few, Labour promised to ban zero-hours contracts and introduce a real living wage of at least £10 an hour by 2020. And that's why today, here in Brighton, I'm announcing that the Labour Party, under our new General Secretary, Jenny Formby, is committing to pay all our staff at any level in our organisation no less than £10 an hour. That's us, Labour, putting our money where our mouth is. We believe in a high-wage economy, so we are committing to pay all our staff a decent wage. I want to pay tribute to the GMB, who, along with Unite the Union, represent Labour Party staff. You've raised this issue in the Labour Party itself, and along with many other trade unions and campaigning bodies, you're leading the fight across our economy for decent pay for all. So, Conference, in many ways, this development in the Labour Party itself reflects how a future Labour government will continue to work with the trade union movement. We'll work with you to transform our scandalous economy that allows the richest to luxuriate in wealth and power, while the majority are denied the full fruits of the work they do. We will change the British state from one that holds people back to one that invests in education, in healthcare, in housing, and in our future, by handing power to communities and workers. But, Conference, none of this will be possible without your help. The power of the Labour movement, but also of Labour governments, lies in the strength of our members and our trade union affiliates. We rely on as many people as possible being as active as they can, spreading our message and making sure our arguments are known. You know, many of the media don't always carry our message very accurately. So it's up to us to do it on their behalf instead and make sure our co-workers and others understand what our policies are, what our hopes are, and what our demands are. And we all rely on trade unionists to fight to get the best possible deal for their members and all workers. We have to have confidence, not just in ourselves, but also in the people of this country, for too long been ignored. So let's go forward together to deliver that better society, that richer society, that fairer society that really does and really will work for the many, not the few. Thank you. Brilliant. Says good luck afterwards. That's right. Signed by Mr. Emery. That way, sorry. Thank you very much. Sorry, yeah. All right.